Pierre Gauthier is President and CEO of Alstom USA. He is with us now to talk about carbon capture and storage, generation, policy. I'm wondering where to start, Pierre, but let's start first of all with your test project at Mountaineer, the project underway in West Virginia. Clean Skies News had a crew just within the last week or so that was up there. Potentially groundbreaking in terms of carbon capture and storage research.
That's right. In fact, we've been doing a lot of research and development in carbon capture for quite a while. In fact, I'd say the pilot tests are behind us, or that well advanced, and now we're moving into the scale-up operation, and the Mountaineer project is definitely that, versus the WE Energies in Pleasant Prairies that we've just completed was more testing the technology, and it has been successful. We've captured well over 90% of the CO2. But the difference with the Mountaineer, other than the scaling up, because this one will be much bigger, is also that the Mountaineer will store the CO2 that we will capture. We ourselves are not involved in that part. We are, of course, the technology provider of the capture part of the CO2.
But would you agree that large-scale commercial viability and deployment is the goal? Is that an easy way to define it?
Absolutely. We haven't spent all these R&D dollars to leave it at that. But so far we're extremely encouraged that this is possible. And that's why we're moving into the scale-up side, in order not to prove the technology, but to improve it in terms of its commercial viability, therefore reducing its capital costs and its operating costs.
Alstom and Duke Energy, or more specifically you and Jim Rogers, have been very vocal and very optimistic about when you can reach that commercial scale deployment. 2014, is that still within reach in your mind?
Well, just had a year. I'd say it's pretty close, but 2015 is our target to be able to sign commercial carbon capture and storage deals.
Is that encouraged or prodded along by the potential of climate legislation in the U.S., or is that regardless of whether or not we get legislation immediately, because it will be coming, it seems, at some point through legislation or regulation?
Yeah. Obviously, for our customers, this is a difficult period because right now there is no price on carbon, and therefore only the ones that are the mavericks and like American Electric Power that believe in it and are willing to invest. But as we scale up to the commercial side, then you start to be in a position where it may have an impact on your bottom line. And therefore, because they are in a competitive environment, the cost of the electricity has to be factored in. And therefore, either there will have to be some policies in place, or at least some support, either from the government or from other sources, in order to compensate for that additional capital cost and the risk involved in proving this technology.
You mentioned the idea of maverick companies. It's a good way to put it. For some time, FutureGen was seen as the best and brightest hope for carbon capture and storage research, among other things. The downturn hit during the Bush administration and the funding issue. Back up and running now, or at least plans are underway. DOE funding is flowing again. Is that still the flagship for CCS research and development?
Well, the FutureGen project, of course, we're not involved in that one.
Exactly.
Although we stand by, we've made our position very clear that should the project be modified, that we would be interested in participating in that. But we've mostly concentrated, I'd say, in the combustion and post-combustion side of the technology versus the pre-combustion. Okay, and so in that sense, whatever projects will find the light, these projects would have to be in line with the technology that we have developed and that we have advanced so far.
But it seems clear that at least up until this point, those maverick companies, as you put it, the independents banding together through the private sector, are making the steps, the incremental steps toward this. You mentioned Pleasant Prairie and now Mountaineer, and then the step beyond that.
But to go further, okay, these steps, I think, these mavericks, which have been extremely generous because they've funded a great deal by themselves of these projects at the pilot and now at the demo stage like AEP is doing. But the next step, when we get into the pre-commercial, these costs are far, far greater. and therefore that's where these customers will need some support by funding in order to make these a reality, because we're getting close to commercial. When you're at the commercial stage and you will have a price of carbon and all the infrastructure, the regulations and so on are in place, then it becomes commercial. And then it's a choice that our customers will be making versus other alternatives that they can have.
You phrase it here, when we get a price on carbon. Let's assume it's legislation. Let's talk about your role in joining USCAP, the U.S. Climate Action Partnership. Roughly 30 companies or entities from the private sector, energy companies, manufacturing companies, also environmental groups all banded together. You joined after the rollout of the blueprint for legislative action on climate issues. Let's talk about the decision of why you joined and why the timing.
Well, first of all, I must say that our presence here in Washington, which is relatively new, it's about a year and a half ago, was aimed at having a greater voice in the policy making and the general activities, especially as it touches power, and in our case also as it touches high-speed rail transport. So we were just not active. It's not the fact that we were unwilling to join or participate, it's just that we were not involved at all. So when we met Mr. Rogers and invited us to USCAP, and we were explained what were the positions of USCAP, it was a natural. We immediately agreed with that and their position, and therefore participated in that organization.
We haven't talked much about the nuclear industry today, which has been left out in large part under the House climate bill. One of the co-authors of the Senate version, Barbara Boxer, has indicated she will include some nuclear incentives. What do you at Alstom need to see or want to see?
Well,
maybe there are two different answers.
You know, one of the positions, in fact, in USCAP covers exactly that, the choice of our customers, depending on where they stand, their geography, the fuels accessible that they have, and in the case of carbon capture, of course, the cost of storing it. Is it close by or far away? We're involved in all the technologies. In fact, in nuclear, we're investing $300 million right now in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to build a steam turbine power plant to be able to supply the eventual nuclear industry. So when you look at it, in order to achieve the 2030 targets of reduction of CO2, essentially the world will have to throw everything at it. It will have to look at efficiency, which is often overlooked. It will have to look at the portfolio of technology, which includes, of course, nuclear, as well as the renewables like wind and hydro, which is often an overlooked aspect of it. And of course, you won't achieve these targets unless you also have carbon capture.
But you also need to look at the cost, especially with the nuclear industry, and not just from a kilowatt per hour standpoint, but the capital necessary to build a plant. The latest estimates are $4 to $8 billion. How much has the economic downturn hurt that flow?
Well, right now, of course, the situation is very much that our customers really don't need additional power that much. But I believe that this is only short term. Eventually the economy will come back and the power requirements will be felt again, and then there will be a need for construction.
Will the capital be there?
Well, that's of course an important aspect of it, but essentially we're dealing with customers that are solid. And I think as soon as the financial industry gets back on its feet, then we'll see the rates be more in line with the projects that we're looking at. But these are part of the choices, as I said. Each power generator has different choices in regards to his location and what his portfolio of capabilities are. And that's why we're saying carbon capture has to be among those choices, and that's why the policy has to support these choices for the power generators.
As promised, a wide-ranging discussion with President and CEO Pierre Gauthier of Alstom US. Pierre, thank you for your insight and time today.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure.